The outer colonies of humanity had always been a source of pride and anxiety at the same time. Worlds like Archean Prime, Lyria, and Norelia had been built from scratch over generations, with humans adapting to every kind of environment imaginable. Some planets were rocky and dry, some covered in oceans, and some had thin atmospheres that required constant attention. On these worlds, humans had built homes, schools, factories, and entire cities, learning to survive where no other species dared to go. They were isolated, yet connected through the pulse of Earth and its fleets. Captain Jiho was on the bridge of the Archeon Prime orbital station when the first flashes appeared in the distance. The station's sensors immediately picked up multiple incoming strikes. At first, it seemed like a simple accident, or perhaps a test of the new defense systems. But within minutes, the reality became clear. Entire city grids were being erased from orbit. The bombardment was precise and relentless, targeting not just military structures, but residential areas, factories, and transport hubs. It was an attack meant to instill fear and show power. Jiho's hands trembled slightly as he adjusted the controls, trying to track the incoming ships. He watched as their shields collapsed one by one under the overwhelming firepower. Alarms blared throughout the station, and the crew moved with practiced urgency, but the fear in their eyes was hard to hide. They were not just soldiers. Many of them were colonists who had volunteered to defend their homes. And now, their homes were disappearing before their eyes. On Earth, the news came with terrifying clarity. Broadcasts from the colonies showed cities burning, people fleeing for shelter, and spaceports destroyed before they could evacuate civilians. But instead of panic, there was a strange quiet. Humans had faced disasters before, though nothing on this scale. Governments convened emergency sessions, military leaders discussed strategies, and scientists worked frantically to predict the enemy's next move. Every human knew that this attack was not a random event. It was a declaration of war. The attackers did not expect resistance. They assumed that humans on the colonies were weak, scattered, and vulnerable. But they had underestimated the spirit that ran through humanity. Earth itself began to mobilize, sending fleets toward the colonies, reinforcing defenses, and evacuating civilians. Messages of encouragement flowed through communication channels, uniting people across light years. Families held on to hope, and soldiers held on to resolve. Captain Jiho coordinated the evacuation as best as he could. The enemy ships were fast, their weapons devastating, but humans had one advantage: ingenuity. Using improvised strategies, they guided evacuation pods through the shadows of destroyed stations, using debris fields to hide from sensors. Jiho personally oversaw the movements, taking risks he would not normally take, driven by the thought of saving lives. He thought of every colonist he had grown up with, every family who had planted themselves on these worlds, and he refused to let them die without a fight. On Archeon Prime, the civilian population was terrified. Buildings collapsed under the bombardment, fires spread uncontrollably, and smoke filled the skies. People ran through streets, searching for shelters that could no longer provide safety. Emergency sirens rang constantly, yet amidst the chaos, there was a sense of order. Volunteers helped organize escape routes, medics treated the injured, and leaders made quick decisions to save as many lives as possible. Human resilience showed itself in the smallest acts: a stranger helping another carry a child, a family guiding each other through debris, or workers manually operating emergency doors when automated systems failed. The enemy fleet believed that fear would break humanity. They expected panic and surrender. What they did not see was the determination that burned in every human's eyes. Even as cities were destroyed, even as lives were lost, humans continued to fight back. Small defense drones fired on enemy ships, orbiting guns targeted incoming missiles, and teams of fighters attempted daring strikes despite being outnumbered. The attackers were met not with submission, but with resistance that they had not prepared for. Earth's leaders watched the situation unfold with grim determination. They knew that reinforcing the colonies alone was not enough. Humanity's survival depended on sending a message that aggression would not be tolerated. Discussions about countermeasures began immediately. Scientists, engineers, and military strategists worked together, devising ways to protect the colonies and push back against the overwhelming force. Every plan focused not just on defense, but on demonstrating that humans were far from helpless. Captain Jiho continued to direct the evacuation with precision. The orbital station shook with the force of enemy fire, yet his voice remained calm over the communication channels, guiding ships and pods through the chaos. He coordinated with planetary defense teams, relaying positions and sharing strategies to maximize the chance of survival. Jiho knew that many would not make it, but every life saved was a victory. He thought of his younger sister, a civilian on the surface, and prayed that she was among those safely evacuated. As the night fell over the colonies, the fires from the bombardment lit the sky like a second sun. Yet even in darkness, humans found ways to persevere. Communication networks, though damaged, allowed messages of hope and courage to travel. Humans on the ground worked together to extinguish fires, treat the wounded, and help those trapped in rubble. They adapted to every obstacle, improvising when tools or technology failed, proving that their strength was not in weapons alone, but in their minds, hearts, and unity. Across the galaxy, observers from other civilizations watched the events unfold. Many had underestimated humanity, assuming that a young, scattered species could be crushed easily. They did not understand that humans had endured countless challenges, from natural disasters to internal conflicts, and had always found ways to survive. Even faced with overwhelming power, humanity's response was not despair, but action. That action, though small in scale compared to the enemy's firepower, sent a clear signal. Humans were not weak. Jiho finally saw a faint glimmer of hope. A group of evacuation pods, carrying hundreds of civilians, managed to escape the orbital path just as a massive wave of missiles targeted them. He directed remaining defenses to intercept the missiles, sacrificing some ships to save the pods. It was a harsh calculation, but Jiho understood the bigger picture. Lives were precious, and humans would fight to ensure the survival of their people, even if it meant taking personal risks. In the end, the first day of the bombardment concluded not with total destruction, but with survival. The colonies had suffered immense losses, yet many civilians had escaped. Ships that remained damaged were hastily repaired or hidden, preparing for the enemy's next strike. Humanity had shown that even in the face of overwhelming odds, they would not bow. And deep within the hearts of those watching from Earth and the colonies, a quiet promise was made. Those who attacked humanity would find that their aggression had awakened something far greater than fear. Captain Jiho looked out from the bridge at the distant fires and smoke rising from the surface. He knew this was only the beginning. Humanity had been tested, and while scars would remain, so too would the determination to fight back. For every colony burned, for every life lost, humanity would respond, not with surrender, but with resilience and preparation. And somewhere deep within, the seeds of a power long hidden were beginning to stir, waiting for the moment to step into the war. Deep beneath the surface of Earth, in hidden bunkers and massive underground facilities, humanity kept secrets that were older than most nations. Machines built to protect and defend, known as the Colossi, lay dormant for centuries. Their existence was whispered about among a few historians and engineers, dismissed by many as legend. They were massive humanoid war constructs, capable of unmatched power, and designed for a time when humanity needed to defend itself from overwhelming threats. Now, with the colonies under attack, the time to awaken them had come. General Dajin stood in the command center of the largest underground facility on Earth. His eyes scanned the holographic maps of the colonies, showing the destruction that had already occurred. The enemy believed humanity was unprepared, that the colonies were just weak outposts. They were wrong. Dajin knew that humanity had hidden strengths, and the Colossi were the ultimate expression of that strength. He turned to Engineer Heron, a woman known for her skill with ancient technology, and gave the order to begin the awakening process. Heron's team worked quickly and efficiently. The first Colossus, dormant for centuries, began to stir as systems powered up one by one. Lights blinked along its massive frame, hydraulics hissed, and circuits that had been silent for generations roared to life. Heron could feel the power in the room, the weight of a machine built not just for war, but to carry the hopes and determination of an entire species. She ran her hands over the control panels, ensuring that every connection was secure, every safety protocol followed. There was no room for error. Meanwhile, news from the colonies continued to arrive. Archean Prime, Lyria, and Norelia had endured waves of bombardment, but humans had survived. Captain Jiho and others reported back, giving detailed accounts of damage, losses, and the enemy's strategies. The Colossi were humanity's answer, but they would need guidance. Each was too large and too powerful to be sent into battle without careful planning. Neural bonds were required. Humans had to synchronize with the machines, and only a few were capable of such a connection. Heron supervised the bonding of the first pilot. Yuna, a young woman with experience in both military tactics and mechanical systems. She would become one with the Colossus, feeling its weight, its movements, and its power as an extension of her own body. The process was delicate and exhausting. Yuna's mind had to synchronize with the Colossus's eye, learn its limitations and strengths, and become comfortable with the enormity of its presence. Hours passed, and then the moment came when the machine responded to her thoughts. It moved slowly at first, as if testing the world again. The ground trembled beneath its feet, a reminder of the immense force it carried. Across Earth, preparations for other Colossi were underway. General Dajin coordinated with military strategists, ensuring that each Colossus would be deployed at the right time and place. The enemy fleet believed humans were defenseless, yet they did not realize that the true weapons of humanity were not just fleets or missiles, but the Colossi themselves. These machines could withstand attacks that would destroy conventional warships, and their presence alone would change the rules of engagement. As Yuna and her Colossus trained, she began to understand the responsibility that came with such power. Each step was measured, each movement considered. The Colossus was not just a weapon, but a guardian designed to protect humanity and reclaim what had been lost. Heron watched with pride, knowing that every calculation, every repair, every decision to maintain these ancient machines had been worth it. Humanity was about to show the galaxy that its strength was not measured in numbers alone, that the awakening of the Colossi did not go unnoticed. Enemy scouts detected massive energy signatures emanating from Earth's underground facilities. Confusion spread among the attackers. They had believed humanity to be weak, scattered, and easy to defeat. Now, mysterious energy readings and reports of massive humanoid figures moving in secret underground facilities unsettled their command. They could not comprehend weapons of this size, designed not to destroy planets, but to reshape battles with precise and controlled force. While the enemy struggled to understand, Earth's forces coordinated with the Colossi pilots. Captain Jiho relayed information from the colonies, highlighting areas most in need of defense and evacuation. Yuna's Colossus moved with remarkable precision, her neural bond allowing her to react to enemy movements faster than any human pilot in a conventional ship. The ground shook as she moved, yet her movements were calculated, minimizing damage to the environment and civilian structures. This was humanity's way. Strength paired with responsibility. As more Colossi awakened, humans across Earth and the colonies felt a renewed sense of hope. Children who had lived under fear and destruction watched as massive machines, piloted by humans, rose to defend them. Soldiers found renewed courage, knowing that these ancient guardians were joining the fight. Even political leaders, who had often debated and argued over strategies, recognized the shift in power. Humanity was no longer merely defending itself with conventional means. It was awakening a force that had been hidden for centuries, a force that could change the course of war. General Dejin addressed the newly awakened Colossi pilots. His voice was calm, but carried the weight of responsibility. You are not here to conquer. You are here to protect. You are humanity's shield, and every step you take will carry the weight of millions who look to you for hope. Move with care, act with precision, and show the galaxy that humanity cannot be underestimated. Yuna felt the truth of his words deep within the neural connection. The Colossus responded, sensing not only her movements, but the intent behind them. Together, they were a single entity, powerful and focused. Each Colossus that followed would be the same: a guardian, a weapon, and a symbol of humanity's strength and unity. Across Earth and its colonies, hope spread. The enemy may have bombed the colonies, but they had awakened something far greater in return. The first night after the awakening was filled with preparation and anticipation. Yuna and her Colossus practiced movements, coordination, and defensive strategies. Engineers continued to fine-tune systems, and General Dejin reviewed plans for deployment. Every human involved understood that this was only the beginning, yet the awakening itself had already changed the course of the conflict. Humanity had shown that even in the face of destruction, it had the ability to rise, adapt, and defend itself with tools and strategies far beyond what the enemy could imagine. In the hidden bunkers and vaults, the Colossi rested, ready to be deployed wherever they were needed most. Each machine carried not just weapons, but centuries of knowledge, planning, and human ingenuity. As Earth prepared to send them into the war, the galaxy began to see that humanity was not merely a species to be conquered. The Colossi were a statement, a promise, and a warning. Humans would protect what was theirs, and they had power enough to change the outcome of any battle. When the first Colossus arrived at Archeon Prime, the enemy forces believed it to be just another machine, a relic perhaps, too slow and heavy to pose any real threat. Their fleet advanced confidently, weapons pointed at the remaining settlements, expecting minimal resistance. They did not understand what they were seeing. Towering above the surface, the Colossus moved with deliberate steps, each one shaking the ground and creating small shockwaves that rippled across the terrain. Its sheer size was intimidating, but it was the precision of its movement that caused alarm. Pilot Yuna controlled the Colossus with calm focus. Through her neural bond, she felt every joint, every hydraulic movement, and every defensive system as if it were part of her own body. She observed the enemy fleet, calculating which attacks to intercept and which threats to ignore. The Colossus had weapons, yes, but its power was in its ability to disable without unnecessary destruction. Yuna was determined not to destroy the planet beneath her feet. Her goal was to defend, to show strength and protect the survivors. The first wave of enemy fighters approached, confident in their numbers. Yuna's Colossus reacted instantly, using its massive arms and energy shields to deflect incoming fire. Weapons that could destroy entire buildings bounced harmlessly off the reinforced hull. A few precision strikes disabled key ships, sending them tumbling into space without harming the surface below. Sensors in the enemy fleet struggled to interpret what they were seeing. These were not ordinary weapons. They were machines that seemed alive, guided by intelligence and intent. As the battle unfolded, humans on the ground, and in the remaining orbital stations watched in awe. Signals relayed by Captain Jiho showed civilians and soldiers alike how the Colossus moved, defending areas they thought were lost. Panic began to transform into hope. The sight of a giant human-controlled machine standing against an overwhelming fleet brought courage to those who had been hiding, fear to those who had attacked, and admiration from those observing from afar. Enemy commanders scrambled to adjust tactics. They attempted to encircle the Colossus, to overwhelm it with superior numbers. But every move they made was countered with calculated responses. Yuna's neural bond allowed her to anticipate attacks, dodge when necessary, and strike when opportunities appeared. She coordinated with nearby human defense systems, directing laser turrets, drones, and ships to work in unison. Each movement was precise, minimizing damage to infrastructure and civilians, proving that humans did not need mindless destruction to win. In the sky, clouds of dust and smoke swirled as the Colossus moved. Ground tremors spread across the planet, and soldiers on the surface used the moment to evacuate survivors and guide them to safe zones. Harin monitored the feedback from the Colossus, checking systems and ensuring Yuna remained in sync. The bond between pilot and machine was strong, a combination of human ingenuity and mechanical power that the enemy could not predict or counter easily. Meanwhile, other Colossi were preparing to join the fight. General Dejin monitored the battlefield from Earth, coordinating with teams across the galaxy. He understood that one Colossus was already changing the tide of battle, but the combined presence of multiple units would create a force impossible to ignore. Engineers and pilots continued preparations, ensuring that each machine would operate effectively and respond to the enemy in ways humans alone could not. The enemy fleet, once confident, began to experience panic. Their sensors could not track all movements simultaneously. Ships disabled by precision strikes caused confusion and hesitation. They had expected easy victories, but humanity had introduced an element they had never accounted for: intelligence, precision, and restraint coupled with immense power. Every Colossus acted not with blind rage, but with purpose, protecting what was human and demonstrating capabilities that defied comprehension. As night fell on Archean Prime, the battle continued, but with a different dynamic. The Colossus, under Yuna's control, held a defensive line around remaining settlements. Enemy attacks became cautious, probing rather than aggressive. Humans used this time to reinforce positions, evacuate civilians, and prepare for future waves. The ground beneath trembled with every Colossus movement, yet humans had learned to trust their presence. They represented not just force, but the promise of protection. Yuna took a moment to observe the stars from her high vantage point. Each light reminded her of Earth, of the colonies, and of the millions relying on her. She felt the weight of responsibility, yet also the strength that came from knowing she was not alone. Other pilots would soon join her, other Colossi would rise, and together, humanity would demonstrate that it could defend itself against any threat. The enemy, now cautious and hesitant, tried to regroup. They called reinforcements, hoping to overwhelm the Colossus with sheer numbers. Yet even as more ships arrived, the presence of the giant humanoid machines changed the calculation. Enemy strategists debated whether to continue or retreat, but hesitation itself was a victory for humanity. Each moment they paused allowed humans to strengthen positions, organize defenses, and prepare for the next move. On the ground, civilians began to rebuild in temporary shelters, inspired by the Colossus's actions. Soldiers coordinated with pilots, using the combined power of humans and machines to hold lines that would have been impossible before. The battlefield transformed from chaos to a controlled struggle, with humans at the center, orchestrating a defense that combined technology, courage, and intelligence. Yuna guided the Colossus with precision. disabling enemy weapons without unnecessary destruction. Ships were pushed away from populated zones, critical infrastructure was protected, and key targets were neutralized. The enemy could not comprehend the strategy. Humans were not just defending. They were demonstrating that restraint and intelligence could match raw power. Every move sent a message. Humanity was not to be underestimated. As the first wave of the enemy retreated, the humans on Archean Prime and other colonies felt a renewed sense of confidence. The Colossus had shown them that even against overwhelming odds, they could survive and fight back. Captain Jiho relayed messages from the surface, praising the coordination and bravery of all involved. Engineers like Heron continued to monitor systems, preparing for future engagement, knowing that the fight was far from over. The first steps of the Colossi into the war had changed everything. The enemy fleet no longer acted with certainty. Civilians and soldiers alike understood that humans had power beyond imagination, intelligence to match it, and a will to protect what was theirs. The Colossi were more than machines. They were symbols of humanity's resilience, ingenuity, and determination. Yuna, standing tall within the Colossus, felt the bond with her machine deepen. Every movement was synchronized, every response calculated, and every decision carried the weight of protecting millions. As the night passed, she realized that this was only the beginning. The Colossi had arrived, and humanity's presence in the war was no longer uncertain. They were giants, guardians, and symbols of hope. The galaxy would soon understand that attacking humans had awakened something far greater than fear. The enemy did not give up easily. They sent larger fleets, armed with heavier weapons, believing that sheer numbers would eventually overwhelm the humans and their colossi. They assumed that more ships, more firepower, and relentless attacks would break the human defenses. They did not understand that humans were not just fighting with machines. They were fighting with strategy, intelligence, and the combined will of a species determined to survive. Commander Sajin took charge of coordinating this effort, bringing together the Colossi pilots and human fleets in a way that had never been done before. Sajin's strategy was simple but effective. He understood the strengths of the Colossi and the human fleets, and he used them together to protect the colonies. The Colossi acted as the first line of defense, moving with precision to intercept enemy attacks. Human ships worked alongside, supporting with ranged fire and intercepting smaller craft. Soldiers on the ground organized evacuation routes and guided civilians to safety. The enemy was surprised to see coordination on this scale. They had expected chaos, but humans were using order and intelligence to turn the tide. Yuna's Colossus moved into position as the new wave approached. The ground trembled beneath every step, signaling the arrival of a machine that carried not only immense power, but also careful control. Yuna had learned from previous encounters, anticipating attacks and using the Colossus's massive arms and shields to protect critical areas. Precision strikes disabled enemy ships without destroying the planet beneath her, demonstrating that humanity's way of war was different. They fought not to destroy, but to defend. Commander Sajin communicated with other human leaders across the colonies, relaying information and adjusting plans in real time. Every Colossus had a pilot, each trained to act not as a machine operator, but as a strategist. They anticipated enemy moves, coordinated with human ships, and executed plans with incredible speed. The result was a force that seemed unstoppable. Enemy fleets could not predict attacks or exploit weaknesses because humans constantly adapted. Learning from each encounter, the enemy tried to focus fire on the Colossi, believing that destroying one would break human morale. But each Colossus was more than a machine. It was a symbol of humanity's resilience. Even when one Colossus was hit, the pilots remained focused, using the machine's remaining strength to protect civilians and repel attackers. Engineers like Heron monitored systems and provided support, ensuring the Colossi could continue fighting. The humans' determination was mirrored in the machines, creating a bond that the enemy could not understand. Civilians on the surface began to witness the full power of humanity's response. Cities that had been evacuated were now protected by massive colossi moving among them, shields deflecting attacks and weapons targeting only enemy forces. Fires from bombardments were extinguished with precision as Colossi and humans worked together. People who had fled in fear now returned to see the machines standing tall, guarding their homes and lives. The morale boost was significant as humans realized they were not alone and that help had arrived in a form the enemy could never anticipate. Una guided her Colossus with skill, disabling enemy weapons, pushing back ships, and coordinating with other colossi. The neural bond allowed her to think quickly and act decisively, responding to multiple threats at once. Other pilots joined, each controlling their colossus with the same focus and precision. The battlefield transformed from chaos to order as humans demonstrated a way of war that was both disciplined and powerful. Enemy commanders began to doubt their plans, realizing that their numbers alone were not enough. On Earth, General Dajin oversaw the battle, coordinating additional reinforcements and monitoring the effectiveness of strategies. Communication lines between the colonies, colossi, and fleets were maintained at all times. Every move was calculated, every action considered. The enemy had underestimated humanity, assuming they were reactive and unprepared. Instead, humans were proactive, controlling the flow of battle and dictating the terms of engagement. Enemy morale began to weaken. Their initial confidence was replaced by confusion and fear. They had encountered human resistance before, but never at this scale and never with such precision. Ships were disabled or destroyed, their formations broken, and their attacks scattered. The humans did not celebrate each victory. They remained focused on the larger goal, protecting lives and reclaiming the colonies. This restraint confused the enemy even further, as they expected aggression and destruction, but found discipline and purpose. The colossi acted as both defenders and symbols. Civilians and soldiers alike were inspired by their presence, gaining confidence and courage. Pilots like Una understood that they were not just controlling machines. They were carrying the hopes of millions. Every step and every strike was guided by intelligence and care, showing that humanity could fight and win without resorting to indiscriminate violence. This approach gave humans an advantage that the enemy could not counter, a combination of strategy, morality, and power. As the battle continued, the enemy made one final attempt to overwhelm the human defenses. They concentrated their fleets, hoping to crush the colossi and break the human line. But Sajin and the pilots anticipated the move. The colossi moved in unison, creating barriers and intercepting attacks. Human ships executed flanking maneuvers, targeting vulnerable points in the enemy formations. Soldiers on the ground coordinated with orbital defenses, using combined firepower to support the colossi. Every move was precise, calculated, and effective. In the end, the enemy was forced to retreat. Their losses were significant, and their confidence shattered. They had underestimated humans and the power of the colossi. The colonies were no longer just survivors. They were defended and organized, ready to continue resisting. Humans had proven that their way of war was not based on destruction alone, but on coordination, strategy, and the protection of life. Commander Sajin observed the battlefield from a command ship, noting the effectiveness of their tactics. The colossi had shown their true power, not as tools of war, but as guardians. Civilians began returning to temporary shelters, soldiers regrouped, and engineers worked tirelessly to repair and maintain the machines. The message was clear. Humanity could fight with both strength and wisdom. Una stood within her colossus, watching the retreating enemy. She felt the bond with her machine deepen, understanding that the Colossus was an extension of her will and determination. Other pilots felt the same, each connected to a powerful guardian, ready for future battles. Across the colonies, humans knew that the Colossi were more than machines. They were symbols of resilience, discipline, and the promise that humanity would defend itself at any cost. The larger fleets of the enemy would think twice before attacking again. Humanity had shown that it could combine strength, intelligence, and morality in ways that were unpredictable and effective. The Colossi had stepped into the war not just as weapons, but as examples of what humans could achieve when united. The colonies were safe for now, and humans had proven that their way of war was not only different but powerful, capable of reshaping the battlefield and inspiring courage in all who witnessed it. The war had reached a turning point. The enemy, once confident in their ability to destroy human colonies, now faced a species united and prepared in ways they had never imagined. Humanity's Colossi, standing tall and powerful, had changed the perception of what it meant to fight against humans. Commander Sajin, General Dejin, and engineers like Heron watched as the final phases of the conflict unfolded, knowing that the lessons learned in this war would echo across the galaxy. The enemy had attempted to regroup, concentrating their remaining fleets for one last offensive. They believed that sheer numbers and overwhelming firepower would break humanity's defenses. But they were wrong. Humans had learned to fight together, combining strategy, technology, and the power of the Colossi. Every movement was coordinated, every strike calculated, and every decision focused on protecting lives while neutralizing threats. The battlefield had shifted from chaos to order, and humans had become the masters of that order. Una, piloting her Colossus, moved through the sky over the colonies with quiet determination. Every step she took carried the weight of millions who relied on her. Her neural bond with the Colossus allowed her to feel the flow of battle as if it were her own body moving. She could anticipate enemy attacks, protect civilians, and support human fleets simultaneously. Other Colossi pilots acted in concert, each performing precise maneuvers that turned the tide of battle in favor of humanity. On the ground, civilians watched in awe as the Colossi moved through the colonies, guarding homes, repairing damage, and deterring attacks. Soldiers coordinated with the giant machines, understanding that they were not just weapons but symbols of hope. Engineers continued to maintain and repair both Colossi and fleets, ensuring that humanity could respond quickly to any new threat. The enemy's attacks became less frequent and more cautious, as they realized that humans were no longer a simple species to overwhelm. General Dejin monitored communications from the colonies and the front lines. He knew that the war would not end with a single battle. The enemy still had strength, but their confidence had been shattered. Each human victory, each successful defense of a colony, weakened the morale of the attackers. The presence of the Colossi, combined with human ingenuity and courage, had demonstrated that any further aggression would be met with overwhelming force. The enemy attempted to negotiate, but humanity did not respond with anger or destruction. The Colossi had shown their strength, and humans had proven their ability to defend themselves. The message was clear. Attacking humanity would no longer be an option. Humans fought not out of vengeance, but out of the necessity to protect life and ensure survival. They had demonstrated that power could be combined with wisdom, restraint, and morality. Una and the other pilots continued their patrols, ensuring that no hidden enemy forces could exploit weaknesses. Each Colossus moved with purpose, protecting both human settlements and key resources. Communication between pilots, fleets, and ground forces was constant, allowing for rapid responses to any threat. The synergy between humans and Colossi created a force that was greater than the sum of its parts, capable of controlling the battlefield and maintaining order even in the most chaotic situations. civilians, slowly returned to their homes. Inspired by the sight of Colossi standing guard and humans coordinating defense. Schools reopened, markets resumed, and communities began to rebuild. The presence of the Colossi reassured people that humanity's survival was secure, and that the sacrifices made during the war had not been in vain. Children watched with wide eyes, understanding that humans had the ability to protect themselves and their world, no matter the threat. The enemy, now fully aware of humanity's capabilities, began to retreat in stages. Their fleets scattered, avoiding direct confrontations with the Colossi. Commanders debated whether to continue fighting or to accept defeat. The humans' response had been precise, disciplined, and effective. Their strength, combined with intelligence and moral restraint, had rewritten the rules of war. The galaxy, which had once underestimated humanity, now began to recognize them as a species that could not be easily defeated. General Dacian addressed all units, both human and Colossi, emphasizing the importance of vigilance. "We have shown our strength and our wisdom," he said, "but we must remain prepared. The Colossi are not only weapons. They are guardians of our people and symbols of what humans can achieve when united. We fight to protect, not to conquer." Our victory today is not just a military success. It is a statement to the galaxy about who we are. Una felt the truth of these words as she guided her Colossus through the colonies. Each movement was deliberate, protective, and controlled. The neural bond with her machine allowed her to anticipate problems before they occurred, respond to threats quickly, and support her fellow pilots and human forces. The Colossi were more than machines. They were extensions of humanity itself, capable of expressing the will, courage, and intelligence of those who controlled them. As the final enemy ships retreated, a sense of calm returned to the colonies. Humans began to assess the damage, repair what was broken, and plan for the future. They had faced an unprecedented threat and survived. The Colossi had stepped into the war not only as instruments of defense, but as reminders of humanity's ingenuity, resilience, and unity. Every human who had participated in the conflict understood that they had changed the galaxy's perception of their species. The war ended not with total destruction, but with understanding and respect. The enemy realized that attacking humans was not a simple task, and that any attempt to dominate or destroy humanity would be met with overwhelming response. The Colossi were returned to dormancy, standing silently beneath Earth and its colonies, waiting for the time they might be needed again. They were guardians, not conquerors, and their presence reminded all that humanity could rise to any challenge. Una, Heron, Commander Sajan, and General Dacian stood together, looking at the Colossi and the recovering colonies. They understood that humanity had grown stronger, not just in power, but in spirit. The lessons of this war would last for generations. Humans had proven that they were capable of defending themselves, protecting their people, and showing that strength could be tempered with wisdom and care. The galaxy had learned the new truth. Humanity does not seek war, but when pushed, they rise as giants.